Alright, let's get started. Today I am talking about my custom stub nib on this Jinhao X159. It's approximately a 0.85mm stub, and it's something that I ground together using a variety of tools. So this was made from a Jinhao fine steel nib. Generally speaking, I will mess with Jinhao nibs when making a custom nib because they are relatively inexpensive and they're available everywhere online that sells them. So this specific nib works in both the Jinhao X159 and the 9019. If you have a Jinhao 159, which takes normally a number 6 nib, this is a number 8 nib. There are a lot of differences between those two pens, the X159 and the 159. You can see under magnification what we've done here. So I literally ground this using a variety of tools and sandpapers, and a fair amount of material was removed from this. So the method through which I ground this was somewhat aggressive at first. But remember, I'm a stranger on the internet. You should not be doing what I do. You should not be considering me a subject matter expert. You do not even know my name. So consider all this with a grain of salt. Fortunately, I have a rather well-equipped workshop, so I have a lot of tools at my disposal, and that made pretty quick work of this. And the most tedious part of it isn't the actual grind, it's the polishing, making sure that your nib is burr-free, and writes as smoothly as possible. In a way, it's kind of like honing a knife. If you have a kitchen knife, you will often sharpen it, and then you will hone it to make sure the blade is where it needs to be to work efficiently. And for polishing, I use these pads. I don't remember where I bought these, but they start at $1,500, they go all the way to $12,000. You can see signs of their usage in the past. Depending on what I am doing, I may start with the 1500. I don't remember what I started with in this case, but I brought it all the way to 6,000. And the result was a freshly honed nib that wrote silky smooth, and with a relatively tamed line variation based on my wild imagination. You can see the thicker downstroke, the thinner cross stroke. It's about a 0.85mm downward stroke. You can, of course, make this as wide or as narrow as you want just by grinding more or less on the initial grind. I was going for a narrower stub downstroke because I have all of these other stub nibs that range from about 1mm to 1.5mm. Somewhere I have a 2mm stub. The pervasiveness of these Jinhao pens and their general accessibility makes them really great nibs to learn on if you are interested in that. There's a lot of bad information out there. I am not going to add to it. I am just happy to show you what I am thinking of as the cap and barrel stub nib. You can tell today is an arthritis day, given how, well, ugly my handwriting is. Not that I have particularly good handwriting, I do not. And I have been trying to work on it and have had absolutely nothing in the way of success. And that's okay, because the journey's the fun part, not the destination. So this specific nib happens to fit both the Jinhao 9019, I have a couple of those, and the X159, I only have one of those. I have not tried to shove a number 8 nib in the 159 yet. The 159 is somewhat more difficult to find at this point. I imagine it's more expensive to manufacture. The 159 is readily available for a couple of dollars everywhere from Etsy to Amazon to Temu and AliExpress. Yeah, you can see my squiggles just definitely being deformed, but you can see some good line variation in some of that anyway. Anyway, the entire landscape of fountain pens should be stub-nibbed, at least as far as I'm concerned, except of course for the architect and the long knife nibs and the oblique nibs. But when faced with using a fine or extra fine or medium nib or literally any other type, I will always opt at least for the stub. In terms of how joyful a nib is to use, when we get to the stub nib, that represents a inflection point, at least for me, in terms of the amount of joy experienced using it versus the relative degree of boredom. And if you're going to invest your time and energy in these pens, you may as well have fun using different nibs. It's so smooth, and it almost sings as it slides across this paper. And do keep in mind that this is junk paper. This is not fancy stuff. I use these notebooks for work-related purposes. I buy them on sale, and that's their virtue. They were like 66 cents each. In 2025, 66-cent notebook. Who could have imagined? What a time to be alive, huh? And that is pretty much that. Alright, that's it for today. Remember, stay in school. Use nibs you like. Blah, blah, blah.